Michael Green wasn't anyone special. At least that's what he'd tell you if you asked. He was just another cog in the machine of downtown Chicago, a small office worker lost in the thrumming hum of an endless workday. Data entry. It sounded so official, so sterile. His life felt equally as clinical, each day bleeding into the next with no real distinction. The office was a windowless gray space where fluorescent lights flickered every now and then. Like the building itself was struggling to stay awake. His boss, Mrs. Caldwell, rarely spoke to him. She had no reason to, really. He was the perfect employee. Quiet, unobtrusive, always there. In a world that ran on meetings and emails, Michael was invisible. He felt nothing when he sat at his desk, staring at an endless stream of numbers on his screen. Nothing except the deep, gnawing ache of boredom that seemed to accompany his every waking moment. Every morning was the same. He would wake up to the blaring sound of his alarm clock, reluctantly drag himself out of bed, shower, eat a quick breakfast, and slip into the cold air of the Chicago streets. The monotony was suffocating. The train ride to work felt like it took forever, as if the city itself was conspiring to keep him from breaking free. His eyes would always wander to the window, gazing at the towering buildings that seemed to loom over him like silent sentinels. He was just another soul caught in the city's web, another nameless face in a crowd of thousands. At work, things didn't get much better. He would sit at his desk, the cool hum of the computer filling the silence as he typed away, inputting data that would be lost in the sea of information before it even had the chance to make a difference. He wasn't doing anything important. He wasn't working on something that would change the world, or even his own life. He was merely a placeholder, a body filling space. His coworkers were just as detached as he was, each of them wrapped up in their own lives, each too absorbed to notice the faint but palpable tension that seemed to pulse in the air. Greg, the only person who ever tried to engage him in conversation, would approach with his usual boisterous greetings. Greg was everything Michael wasn't. Loud, outgoing, brash. He was the kind of person who made small talk an art form, someone who couldn't understand the appeal of silence. Every day, without fail, Greg would stop by Michael's desk and make some offhand comment, usually about the weather or a sports game. Michael would nod, say a few words, and return to his screen, but it was all so forced. It was easier to let Greg talk than to try and make a connection. After all, what was there to talk about? The world outside seemed so far removed from the sterile confines of the office. Nothing seemed to matter. His job, his life, his relationships with the people around him. Everything was a blur of gray, fading into nothing. The only thing that kept him going, kept him moving through the motions of the day, was the vague hope that something would change. He didn't know what that change would look like or when it would come, but deep down he clung to the belief that one day he would wake up and it would be different. Until then, he existed in a state of half-life, going through the motions without ever really living. That is, until one fateful Tuesday afternoon. The day had been slow. No meetings, no real work to do. It was the kind of day that stretched endlessly in front of him, a vast expanse of hours with nothing to fill them. Michael's gaze wandered to the clock on the wall. Another hour had passed. It wasn't even close to the end of the day, and yet he already felt exhausted. His body was here, in the office, but his mind was elsewhere, lost in some distant daydream of escape, of freedom, of a life where he wasn't just another data entry clerk stuck in a cycle of routine and monotony. His eyes scanned the screen in front of him, flicking between tabs. He had no real purpose today, no tasks to complete. It was in this void of productivity that he noticed the email. It wasn't an important email, just another generic work message, a reminder to fill out a form, an announcement about an office meeting. But the subject line was different, simple, to the point. It read, "Are you bored?" Michael blinked, a faint smile tugging at his lips. He leaned back in his chair, stretching his arms above his head. "Yeah, I am." He muttered the words aloud, his voice barely a whisper in the otherwise silent office. It wasn't a question that anyone ever asked him. At least, not in any meaningful way. He'd never thought about it in such blunt terms, but as soon as he read those words, the answer came rushing to the surface. He was bored. He was so bored, it ached. His life had become a series of unchanging moments, each indistinguishable from the last. He felt like he was slowly suffocating in the tedium of it all. The email seemed almost like a lifeline, a strange, unexpected interruption in the monotony. It didn't offer much. In fact, it didn't even promise much. The body of the message was as simple as the subject line. Are you dissatisfied with your life? Do you need more structure? We can help. Visit our site and sign up today. Michael stared at the screen, his mind racing. A scam, he thought. This was just another trick. Some marketing gimmick designed to prey on people's dissatisfaction. The message was too straightforward, too tempting in its simplicity. And yet, Michael couldn't bring himself to delete it. Instead, he felt something else, a flicker of curiosity. What did he have to lose? His life was already a mess of empty routines. Was there anything else that could be worse than this? Are you dissatisfied with your life? Do you need more structure? We can help. Visit our site and sign up today. Michael stared at the screen, his mind racing. A scam, he thought. This was just another trick. Some marketing gimmick designed to prey on people's dissatisfaction. The message was too straightforward, too tempting in its simplicity. And yet, Michael couldn't bring himself to delete it. Instead, he felt something else, a flicker of curiosity. What did he have to lose? His life was already a mess of empty routines. Was there anything else that could be worse than this? Do you accept? A yes button? A no button? Michael hesitated. He wasn't sure why, but something compelled him to click yes. Perhaps it was the boredom, or maybe the desperation for something new, anything to break the cycle he was trapped in. In that instant, he felt an odd mixture of excitement and dread. He clicked. A message appeared on the screen. Thank you for accepting. For a moment, Michael just stared at the words. What had he done? But before he could dwell on it, he shrugged it off, standing up from his chair and stretching. Another day? Another hour to kill? Maybe he would grab a coffee. Maybe he would read a book. Maybe he would go for a walk. Anything to escape the heaviness of the office for a while. He turned to leave his cubicle, but as he did, he caught a glimpse of the clock on the wall. Time had passed. Not much, but enough. Just enough for him to wonder what was about to come. The possibility of something different, something new. This was the moment when everything changed for Michael. He had no way of knowing it then, but the simple click of a button would open doors he couldn't even begin to imagine. Doors to a world where the supernatural was real. Doors to a life that would never be the same. But in that moment, as he walked towards the break room, he felt nothing but a strange sense of anticipation. The office around him, the people, the droning hum of the fluorescent lights. It all seemed distant. There was something bigger, something waiting for him, just around the corner. And he had no idea that he was about to step right into it. Michael sat at his desk the next day, staring at the screen in front of him. The familiar dull buzz of the office surrounded him, but today it felt different. There was a subtle shift in the air, like the world had tipped slightly off its axis. Just enough for him to feel it, but not enough for anyone else to notice. His mind kept drifting back to the email he had received. The strange message with a simple question. Are you bored? It had been the catalyst, the moment that had unknowingly set him on a path he couldn't turn back from. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as his thoughts wandered. He had read and reread the email, thought about it more than he cared to admit. There was something about it that had made him click yes, even though every instinct in him screamed that it was some sort of scam. But what did he have to lose? His life? His job? Everything felt like a blur of routine and monotony. That email, that bizarrely personal message, had felt like a promise of something more, something different. And in that moment, as he pressed that fateful button, he had unknowingly accepted an invitation into a world far beyond his understanding. The rules, though strange, had continued to come, each one more cryptic, more disturbing than the last. Never stir your coffee counterclockwise. Do not watch horror movies after midnight without covering your feet. Each email felt like an intrusion into his already fragile sense of normalcy, but he couldn't stop himself from following them. Something deep inside told him that the moment he broke the rules, everything would change, and that terrified him more than anything. The first time the strange occurrences began was on a Wednesday. Michael had walked into the break room, tired of the empty routine of his cubicle, desperate for something, anything, to break the monotony. As he poured his coffee, he noticed the peculiar sensation that had been creeping under his skin for the past few days. It was subtle, a pressure that seemed to push in from all directions, making the air feel thicker, heavier. But it was nothing compared to what happened next. As he stirred his coffee, he felt the familiar chill creep over him, like someone was watching him, standing just beyond the reach of his vision. He turned his head, trying to shake off the feeling. But there, at the edge of the doorway, stood a figure. The woman. The ghostly figure he had seen only once before. Shannon. Her skin was as pale as it had been before, an unnatural, sickly hue. Her eyes, clouded and vacant, stared directly at him, and for a moment time seemed to stop. Michael's breath caught in his throat. Was this really happening? Was he imagining it? But no, it wasn't his imagination. Shannon stepped into the room, her movements slow and deliberate, like a marionette with strings pulled by an invisible hand. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her presence was enough. She walked past him, her feet shuffling along the floor with a soft, dragging sound that sent a chill through his body. What was happening? Why was she here again? Michael tried to rationalize it, to convince himself that he was losing his mind. But as she approached the coffee pot, reaching out with long, bony fingers, he couldn't deny the strange feeling rising within him. This wasn't a prank, and it wasn't some sick joke. This was real. Without a word, she reached for his coffee cup. Her fingers were cold, and as she lifted it, she seemed to pour something invisible into it. The motion was so familiar, yet so bizarre. And then, without a single glance back, she turned and shuffled out of the break room. Just like that. No one else had noticed. No one had seen her. It was as if she existed only for him, and the rest of the world was blind to her presence. What was happening? Why was she here again? Michael tried to rationalize it, to convince himself that he was losing his mind. But as she approached the coffee pot, reaching out with long, bony fingers, he couldn't deny the strange feeling rising within him. This wasn't a prank, and it wasn't some sick joke. This was real. Without a word, she reached for his coffee cup. Her fingers were cold, and as she lifted it, she seemed to pour something invisible into it. The motion was so familiar, yet so bizarre. And then, without a single glance back, she turned and shuffled out of the break room. Just like that. No one else had noticed. No one had seen her. It was as if she existed only for him, and the rest of the world was blind to her presence. Michael hurried back to his cubicle, his mind a whirlwind of questions, but no answers. He couldn't explain it. He didn't want to. The feeling that something had shifted, something had been set into motion, gnawed at him, consuming him. That night, as he sat in his dimly lit apartment, the eerie taste still lingering in his mouth, Michael checked his inbox once again. Another email awaited him, its subject line sending a chill down his spine. Rule number 2, do not watch horror movies after midnight without covering your feet. What was this? What kind of strange, archaic rules was he being forced to follow? He shook his head in disbelief. He wasn't one for superstitions, never had been. Horror movies didn't scare him. But something in the email tugged at him, like an invisible thread pulling him toward it. He had to obey. He dismissed the thought, but that strange feeling, the one that had started when Shannon appeared, refused to leave. It clung to him like a shadow, trailing behind him no matter how hard he tried to shake it. That night, when midnight arrived, Michael found himself on the couch, remote in hand, staring at the screen. The dark room felt heavier, more oppressive. His feet were exposed, the chill in the air creeping up his legs. It was absurd. Why should he even care about the rule? He had broken so many already. But for some reason, the thought of not covering his feet made his stomach turn. He pulled a blanket over his legs, trying to shrug off the nagging sense of unease. But as he watched the movie, a sinking feeling began to take root deep inside him. The hair on his neck stood on end. The air in the room grew colder, more suffocating. His eyes kept darting to the window, half expecting to see something out there, something that didn't belong. The tension in his chest grew with every passing second, each creak of the floorboards sounding like footsteps behind him. It was Shannon. Her figure was a blur at first, but as she stepped forward into the moonlight that filtered through the window, he could see her more clearly. Her eyes were wide open, staring at him, and her grin had stretched even further than before. The same decaying skin, the same twisted expression. She moved toward him slowly, her fingers twitching, ready to reach out and touch him. Michael wanted to scream, but the sound wouldn't come. The fear that gripped him was unlike anything he had ever felt. It was raw and primal, choking him from the inside. He had broken the rules. He had invited this into his life. And now it was coming for him. But just as quickly as she had appeared, the power flickered back on, and the world seemed to snap back into focus. Shannon was gone. The room was empty again. The TV flickered back to life, and the silence that had filled the room evaporated. Michael stood there, frozen in place, his heart hammering in his chest. What was happening? What had he just experienced? Was it real? Or was he losing his mind? There was no answer, only the growing certainty that the rules were not just harmless games. They were warnings, warnings that he couldn't ignore. He had crossed a line, and now he was being forced to face the consequences. The only question now was whether he could survive them. Michael Green's journey, though wrapped in supernatural occurrences, is more than just a tale of strange emails and eerie experiences. At its core, it's a story of transformation, a reminder of how the most unexpected events in life can push us beyond our limits, making us confront parts of ourselves that we might otherwise ignore. The rules, absurd as they seem, aren't just about supernatural forces lurking in the shadows. They're symbolic of the choices we make in life. Michael's journey started with a simple click, an act of boredom, of dissatisfaction with the routine of life. But that click, that one decision, set into motion a series of events that challenged everything he knew about the world and himself. We all face moments where life seems dull, where we question our place in the world. These moments of discontent can either keep us stagnant or propel us toward something greater. Michael, despite his doubts and fears, stepped into the unknown, and in doing so, he discovered that change, growth, and even fear are necessary to evolve. It's easy to stay in a place of comfort, to accept the status quo, and let time slip away without ever challenging it. But as Michael learned the hard way, stagnation is the silent killer of possibility. It's the voice that tells us to keep doing the same things, day after day, without ever wondering if there's something more, something beyond. Each of the rules he faced seemed trivial at first, simple, almost laughable instructions that didn't seem to hold any real significance. But through every rule he followed, he learned something deeper about the consequences of his actions, the unseen forces that can shape our reality when we choose to pay attention. The eerie events he encountered weren't just about the supernatural. They were about his relationship with his choices, with the world around him, and ultimately with himself. What happens when we stop questioning? When we let ourselves be guided by the unknown instead of following the same tired paths? Michael's experience was a wake-up call to the power of the unknown, and how, if we dare to step into it, we might uncover parts of ourselves we never knew existed. We might discover new strengths, new fears, and new possibilities. Life, at its heart, isn't about avoiding fear or discomfort. It's about embracing it, learning from it, and using it as fuel for personal growth. The real lesson here is simple yet profound. Don't be afraid to break the rules. The rules in Michael's world may have been arbitrary, but in our lives, the rules we follow can be just as limiting. The rules of routine, the rules of fear, the rules we've convinced ourselves are unbreakable. It's only when we challenge these norms that we have the chance to truly grow. And yes, while the supernatural forces that haunted Michael's every move were terrifying, they ultimately pushed him towards self-discovery. They made him confront his own apathy, his own fear, and his own reluctance to embrace the unknown. He could have chosen to ignore the emails, dismiss the warnings, and continue in his stagnant life, but in choosing to confront the unknown, he found his true potential. There's a certain power in the unknown. It's uncomfortable, yes, and often downright terrifying, but it's in the uncertainty, the discomfort, and the unpredictability that we find the raw material for change. Sometimes you have to embrace the chaos to see what lies on the other side. The path to growth isn't paved in neat, predictable steps. It's messy, uncertain, and often leads us down roads we never expected. But it's the only way to truly live, to embrace the lessons the universe throws our way, and use them to build a life that's meaningful, not just a life of convenience. Michael's experience is a stark reminder that we can't keep living on autopilot. The decisions we make, even the small ones, have power. The choices we make today can lead us to a completely different tomorrow. And sometimes it takes a strange, supernatural twist to push us into action. But no matter how we get there, the journey of self-discovery is the most important one we will ever take. So, if you're reading this and feeling like life is stuck in a rut, like you're on a never-ending loop of routine with no way out, take a moment to question it. Challenge the norms. Break the rules. Step into the unknown. You may not have all the answers, but you'll discover that the journey itself is worth far more than the safety of staying where you are. And if you've been captivated by Michael's story and want to see how his journey unfolds, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps us going, and with it, we can bring you even more thrilling, thought-provoking content. Stay tuned for the next chapter, where the rules get even more dangerous and the stakes become life-altering. Thank you for being part of this journey with us. Your engagement helps us create stories that inspire, challenge,